Welcome to Transform Ed Consulting, where vision becomes strategy and strategy creates lasting impact. We empower educational leaders through program evaluation, strategic planning, leadership coaching, and data-driven solutions that inspire meaningful change. Our mission is to create opportunities that prepare learners for career success, college readiness, and lifelong achievement. Start your journey toward educational excellence today. Your initial consultation is absolutely free.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Johnson, Transform Ed Consulting, and it's my pleasure to have as our guest today, Gwen Thomas. Hi, Gwen.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. We're going to have a good conversation. Well, let me introduce you formally. Gwen Thomas is an education consultant, scholarship strategist, and founder and executive director of Fresh Perspectives Seminars Incorporated, a Michigan-based nonprofit dedicated to helping students and families obtain higher education without being overwhelmed by debt. For more than 14 years, Gwen has helped more than 10,000 students and families secure over $32 million in scholarships while providing college admissions, financial aid, career exploration, and financial literacy guidance. A national speaker and author of The Parent's Smart Guide to Sending Your Kids to College Without Going Broke, 8th edition, Gwen has been featured on PBS, NBC, Fox, ABC, and CBS programs, and in publications such as Forbes and Black Enterprise. Through workshops, scholarship boot camps, and personalized coaching, Fresh Perspectives Seminars equips first-generation, underrepresented, and college-bound students with the knowledge, confidence, and strategies to pursue their educational dreams while minimizing loan debt and maximizing opportunity. Gwen, how did you get into this business?
Well, I tell people totally by accident. I had a son that was on his way to college, and around the time he was about 14, I started kind of paying attention to national news as they were talking about the cost of education was increasing. And so I would have these little conversations with him and said, listen, when you go to college, you're going to have to get scholarships because I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to pay for it. So I planted the seed early. And as he was approaching high school, I thought it was important for him to be engaged in community programs. And so his very first program, he was involved in a program at Cambridge University near Oxford abroad. Mm-hmm. And I asked the question about scholarships. He obtained scholarships to participate in that program. And from there, I started beginning to be serious about the conversation about scholarships.
Well, of course, a lot of controversy has followed this business in, let's say, the last 3-4 years, where people have actually gone to jail for breaking laws regarding helping students get into college. So what's behind that, and how does one get him or herself into trouble, and how can one avoid trouble in that regard?
Well, you're referring to the whole admissions scandal. Right. That happened out in Southern California, where, you had a group of, rich kids who were paying, some education consultants at a very high level for their children to get into Ivy League and prestigious colleges. And many of them did not have the grades and were not, measured as the average student would be and given the same consideration. They were given extra privileges. And so there was dollars under the table that was being passed along, and it opened it up to a big scandal where people made millions of dollars for years. And finally, it was exposed about what was going on. And so those are the privileges that some people took advantage of. I'll put it that way.
I see. Well, I hope you don't get your fingers in that type of enterprise. And I think it's very important to help young people find their way to school. And as you spoke, I remember, I think my college was around $3,000 a year for both tuition and room and board. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that was a long time ago. That was a long
Yeah,
time
I
ago.
understand. It was not far from what that was for me either. And
Right.
I started paying attention as we were getting closer to my son going to college. And I just was curious as to what happened to the cost of college and why it skyrocketed.
Right.
And I was able to trace that information to 1981 is when I graduated college. And then around 1980, Ronald Reagan took office. And it was his goal to cut the cost of funding for colleges. And so it moved to parents beginning to have to pay for it. But college was affordable before that time.
Yeah. You know what? If one pays attention, almost every day, if not every day, there's something in the news regarding tuition and
Yes, every
affordability
single day.
every day. And the things that the federal government is doing or not doing to help students obtain higher education. Well, ma'am, the title of our conversation today is Sending Your Kids to College Without Going Broke, and we have 5 bullets. Where would you like to start?
Well, I'll start with number one. When I talk about making sure parents are aware of their education environment, meaning most families in their heart of hearts, they want their student to have access to a fine education. And so one of the things that when you are enrolling your student, you want to begin to think about what kind of school am I going to enroll them in? Is it going to be a public? Is it going to be a private school? Is it going to be a parochial school? Is it going to be an IB school? And so you have to look at that journey and find out what is going to be the best fit for my child.
Well, I like the way you use the term journey, and you say preschool through college.
Right.
I'll use my family as an example. My brother and I were both first generation college attendees. So what do we do, or how do we help parents whose children would be first generation? How do they know anything about the journey? How do they follow preschool through college?
Well, if you're concerned, and most parents are, they start off concerned, and then a lot of times other things get in the way, like they don't have enough time to nurture that child. I mean, the first teacher for a child is their parent. And so if you're concerned in your heart of hearts, you want your son or daughter to be successful. And so the things, when you make the decision, you've got to be conscious of the decision you make in enrolling, what school you're enrolling your child in, who is going to provide the best education. And so I encourage families to look at the results, the testing, the scoring. How does that school compare to the schools in that community?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that I need to take my kid out of that community? So, for example, for me, when my son was approaching the time to go to elementary school, prior to that, there had been the beginnings of charter school education. And there had been a woman, and I refer to her in my book, was a woman by the name of Deborah McGriff, and she still is an education consultant today. And she had come into Detroit really wanting to turn things around and had a charter school concept, meaning we can't continue to do business as it's been done in the past. We've got to make sure our students are meeting education benchmarks. I like what she was saying, but she got so much pushback because, of course, people who've been in that situation, they want things to maintain. There's a lot of different elements to school districts. There's, procurement. There's all kind of issues. And so she got some pushback, but I followed her. And, what she led me to believe is that we've got to change the paradigm as it relates to educating our children. So when it came time, by the time my son got to elementary school, they had ran her out of town. And so I was like, where do I start? And so I shopped around. I think my son probably went to 4 different elementary schools. I put him in a charter school, didn't like it because it was the new charter school. I put him into Catholic school and I wasn't happy there. And then finally, I decided to move outside of the city and move into a suburban school. And
Now,
they had
now let me stop you, Gwen. I'm sorry. You touched on a lot of topics there. With whom do you communicate? The student or the parent, the family?
What do you mean?
When, all right, the example you gave of the woman who is still an education consultant, did she speak with you? Did she coordinate with you? Did she approach you through your son? How did you get connected with her?
I didn't personally ever connect with her till
Oh,
years later. She was the superintendent of schools for Detroit.
I
She
see.
had gotten that job. They ran her out of town because she had fresh ideas. And
Mhm.
we needed a paradigm shift. As a parent, I was hungry.
Mhm.
I had a black male child that I wanted to have a fine education.
Mhm.
And so what I had seen prior to that was no way I was going to put him in Detroit public schools.
Mhm.
And so, but when she came with the idea about charter schools and she started educating how important it is to be mindful of test scores and because there are some educators and school districts for a young black male, the first thing they're going to do is say that they need, special attention. And, and so I didn't want my son to be stereotyped into a situation where, he needs special attention because he was a rambunctious boy. There was dynamics that we need to make sure that they were covering.
So in your current work, do you work with students, work with parents, or the entire family?
I work with everyone. So first of all, I try to approach the school district, okay, and say, listen, I have a series of programs, like for instance, it's the beginning of the school year now, in a couple of weeks. And I let them know, and since some of them will say, well, you have to go through the procurement process, and I don't often fit into their procurement, meaning they have their idea of what I should fit into, and it doesn't fit.
Right.
And so, but then I have some school districts who will say, she's cutting edge. She has a different approach. We need personalization with some of our students. We want her. And then I have parents who've heard about my work, who've said, listen, I need help. I do this full time. So you have a parent who oftentimes whose student is heading to college or high school, they have their own concerns and their own 9 to 5 that they're putting 60 hours a week. They need somebody to say, will you coach my student on this journey? Can I ask you some questions as it relates to, gearing my child toward trade school or gearing my child toward, a college education?
Gwen, I'm going to interrupt you again. I'm sorry. You really are saying a lot of good stuff. So my head is about to burst. So let me interrupt. Be engaged. So when you're working with families, when you're working with parents, again, I'm thinking of the parent who didn't have the college education, where their children are first generation. And the strongest predictor of whether a child will attend college is whether the mother attended college. So let's say you have first generation college students or potential college students. How do you help families interpret all of those scores, all of that paperwork, all of that bureaucracy that must be managed for a child to actually get into school?
So David, and I should remind you that it's not always about that parent going to college. There's a grandmother, there's a mother who in their heart of hearts, they want their child to be successful. They didn't get a chance to go to college. They didn't get a chance to have certain opportunities. They might have had a dream and it might have been deferred or something. And so you don't always have to be the person that went to college, but there are parents who are asking for help and they said, I've not gone to college. Some of them will say, I need help. Help me help my child. Then there's some parents who don't know to ask. They don't know what they don't know. And so I try to help both the students who say I need help because my parents don't know how to help me, and I help those families. So, I'm available. I even work outside of the school districts. I work with nonprofits. I work with, the churches and the other civic organizations who realize that education is a human right, that education, we want to make sure our students have the best opportunities that are available.
Okay. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. I'm watching the clock. We better take our next bullet. Strengthen students' academic and learning tools with extracurricular activities, reading, and pre-core programming. Academic and learning tools. What do you mean by learning tools?
So I tell families all the time, there are libraries that are underutilized. You want to make sure that that's a part of your journey on, Saturday mornings. And I tell students all the time, and I don't expect everyone to follow I just give them some food for thought, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a working mom and couldn't understand why school was only till 3:00 and I got off at 5. It didn't make sense. Well, I was lucky enough when I moved to the suburbs that there was a little mini bus that could take my son from school to the library that was only 10 minutes away. I packed his lunch. You do your work at the library. And then every week I made sure that he had a book to read, meaning I want to know what book you're reading. So remember, let's go back to the parent is the first teacher. Second is the fact that the student is not going to learn everything in the classroom. It's the parent's responsibility to get them to extracurricular activities to begin to nurture their understanding of their particular field. So case in point, you have a student that says, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. And so that means that if they're at the library, what's wrong with getting some books about medicine? What's wrong? That's their first orientation to that book about a doctor, about a nurse, or about another healthcare profession. And then secondly, we've had a major medical phenomenon, COVID, which sparked the interest of so many students who wanted to say, well, what happened? Nothing like this happened. So we want to talk about if they're saying that they're getting exposed to, disease management or anything, that's their opportunity. So I tell students all the time, learn. If there's something you like, build on it every year.
Well, Gwen, I'm going to interrupt you again. Again, you're saying a lot of good stuff, and I don't want to let it get away from us. All right. I spoke earlier about whether the mother attended college is the strongest predictor of whether a child will attend college. You know that there are some parents who had bad experiences when they were in school and consequently transmit those bad feelings to their children.
Yes.
What do you do with such a parent regarding encouraging that parent to send his or her child to the library after school or to engage in any extracurricular activity after school?
Well, we're going to have some good parents and we're going to have some bad parents. And so the only thing that we try to do is make sure we reach parents and families in a positive sense, because a positive results will happen. And so we can't change everybody's mind about education. We can only encourage them.
Pre-core programming. What's pre-core?
So pre-core programming is, for instance, you've heard of back in the day, remember future teachers. When we were in the 4th grade, that was the kid who wrote the lesson on the board, or who cleaned the erasers, or who washed the board. Future teachers. Remember, they were the teacher's assistant. Well, there's opportunities for students to be assistants to all kinds of things. There are programs at organizations who offer up. I'm a member of the National Association of Black Journalists. So there's internship opportunities for students as early as high school. There are high school programs that give students an orientation to their particular field that they have an interest in. It might be the National Association of Securities Professionals, who'd say there's a student that's interested in finance, or the National Association of Black Engineers, who gives students an orientation to the different type of engineers and the different engineering programs. So when a kid talks about that they have an interest, the parent or as well as the school, we want to make sure that they get information on how they can become members and involved in those extracurricular programs, either through the summer or after school. It builds their dossier for them to talk about their experiences when they write scholarship essays.
I'm glad you mentioned school. It might be a little bit different now, but sometimes schools, society in general, makes the assumption that everyone has access to the internet. Instead of telling you to write a letter or to make a telephone call, it just say our web address is this.org or .com, and just assume everyone has access to the internet. So what do we do? How do we communicate? How do we communicate information to parents and or students who don't have access to the internet?
Well, that's unfortunate for those families and those school districts who still don't have access to internet. And then that's when we have to hold our legislatures accountable for not making sure that families have this benefit. There are tons of programs. I do know of several that have provided free internet, like Xfinity and Comcast in certain cities provide that. AT&T provides laptop computers to organizations and people and communities. They've helped me in the work that I do. So if that's the case and there's a listener who is in a community, I would suggest that they reach out to just those two organizations, and there are more, to make sure that they advocate that they have access to the internet or the internet tools such as computers. They have distributed thousands of computers to disadvantaged families.
Thank you, Gwen. That was very good information. All right, our next bullet: nurture students' life experiences, ensure students have emotional, mental, and physical support, help students grow through problem solving. I got to tell you, I focus on help students grow through problem solving. Mm-hmm. And my question was that they learn how to solve problems, or that we mentor them, so to speak, through the problem solving process?
We have to mentor them through that problem solving, because we have a lot of problems in schools, and we cannot ignore them. And a lot of times schools ignore them, and they just look at it as, this kid, let's put them in detention. And when you get down to the root of it, you have kids who want to be successful, but they have some things that stand in the way. Things that stand in the way might be something as simple as not having food to eat before they come to school. They can't concentrate because they're hungry. They may have a challenge at home where there is some kind of abuse in the household. They may have a situation where they can't get to school. They live far away. They may have a situation where they don't have clean clothes, and their friends are teasing them, saying they don't smell as well as they should. They may have a situation where they are challenged with some learning disabilities. And so these are the things that when we get rid of programming in our schools, these are the kind of things that affect young people, that they want to be successful, but we have to provide wraparound services. And so the results show that, when you're able to provide these services, there are young people who succeed. And the bottom line is, we live in a society that is not perfect. Mm-hmm. We live in a society who has lots and lots of challenges. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be mindful. Mm-hmm. This is what we need to do to grow our young people into productive adults.
What role does nurturing students' life experiences play in problem solving?
Well, the thing is, you can't expect students to know how to solve the problem. And so, as we look at cuts, cuts sometimes are with those individuals in the schools who were there, social workers, and psychologists who used to be in the schools to recognize and help a student get through those problems. So a lot of the school districts have cut those individuals. But one of the things that we know as adults, sometimes when we go through things that make us be a stronger adult, our young people are not at that level, but we have to nurture them and teach them that you can be successful. And as adults in in society, we have to make sure we help our young people. So when I say problem solving, that means adults helping our young people to get through those issues.
This next bullet: understand financing a college education and the dynamics of paying for college. I had some assumptions that I developed after reading that. What do you mean, before I tell you what I meant, what I took from that bullet?
Well, people don't really understand the cost of college today. I mean, we have private colleges and we have public colleges, we have trade schools. People say, well, I'm not going to college, my son is going to trade school. There's still a cost associated. There's still testing. So they have to understand that. They sometimes don't understand that a private school many of them cost more than a public school. And so when they sit down and do the planning, they have to figure out, is this college affordable for me? And how do I get there? Am I going to pay for it with my savings as a parent, a 529 plan that I put together? Am I going to have to get a Parent Plus loan? Will my student have to also get a loan? And if we do all that, will it still pay for it?
Gwen, you open one gigantic can of worms. Right now, our federal government is penalizing colleges and students if there is no good ROI, no good return on investment. So is that something one should consider when financing a college
absolutely.
education?
Families have not been paying attention. Number one, a lot of scholarships and a lot of dollars that were earmarked for students are now being said, well, that's part of a DEI program and we're not funding that. Or if you fund those kind of programs, we're cutting your federal dollars.
Right.
And so dollars that students depended on, those dollars are going away. There are now caps on the amount of student loans. The Parent Plus loan is capped, for example, at $65,000 over a 3-year period. Now, I will say I normally hear from families the second and third year when they've run out of money. Well, that's almost an assurance that they won't make it through, because $20,000 at a private institution is not enough a year. And so that 20 for the 3 years is not enough. The 25,000 the last year is still not enough. If they are going to a top school, those top schools are running anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000.
You mentioned Parent Plus loans. Would you define what a parent loan is, particularly differentiating it from other types of loans?
So you have the Parent Plus loan for education and you have a private loan. So the Parent Plus loan is funded by the government, is at a lower interest rate. I'm not sure what the interest rate is right now. But if you go to the bank, that's called a private loan. So now parents are going to find themselves having to get the Parent Plus loan if they have not planned, because I don't like the word loan. I tell families get scholarships, and I'll talk about that later. So they're going to find themselves where the parent is going to have $65,000. The student's maximum they can borrow is $31,000. And then they're going to have to go to private, funding like a Fifth Third Bank and get additional funding, which is on an interest rate. And that is going to have to be paid as they go. It's not deferred. The Parent Plus loan, part of that can be, the student loan, that can be deferred until they graduate. And so all of those elements are going to be something that families are going to be challenged with. How do I pay that? And a parent at the age of 50 to 60 to 70, they're going to be paying at the same time where they're losing the amount of income that they may have because they're moving toward their retirement years. And so, they're now in a Social Security era where they're not getting the same amount of money they once did.
Now, where do you stand on second mortgages?
Well, I don't believe in that at all. So parents will go out and get an equity loan, a home equity loan, and that's a disaster in my family. I should say not my family, but that's a disaster in my viewpoint because of the fact that, you're digging a hole, you're digging yourself in debt. And so if families will take the time and plan earlier, they won't face these kinds of challenges. In my book, The Parent Smart Guide to Sending Your Kids to College, I talk about that journey all the way from 4th grade through college. And that's why it's so important for them to begin to plan. And so I've helped students win about $32 million in scholarships.
Let's talk a little bit about scholarships. The clock is ticking. Let's talk a little bit about scholarships. I think something people don't realize is sometimes there are scholarships that are specific, so specific that not everyone is eligible for it. And it just might be you who is eligible for that specific scholarship. For example, I established a scholarship at my college alma mater. And at one time it was so specific, I couldn't get any applicants. So I had to broaden it a little bit. But my point is, there are scholarships that aren't so well known, let's say. And how does a family find those hidden scholarships?
Well, I have to give you a plug. I have 1,000 scholarships in my book from undergrad to PhD. Plug, there's there. But there are tons of scholarships. I mean, not just the internet, because, you have to tap into, so many organizations. There are fraternities, sororities, there are church organizations, there are all kind of private scholarships. And then, I tell families by 11th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, your radar goes up. If you have a student that's heading to college, begin to collect that information, because most of the time, those scholarships are renewed every year, or information when the deadlines are, and there are so many scholarships that students don't apply because they don't have the proper skills to write them. They're intimidated by the scholarship writing process. That's one of the things that we do very well. We teach students how to write to win, not just write scholarships and get them in. Because at the end of the day, the foundations and the organizations, they want a solid scholarship essay, a student, they want to award a student that they can be proud of, that they can follow, and they can have bragging rights and say, this is one of our students, they're now a doctor. We helped them with their first or their second scholarship. We met the need, we met their gap. Yeah. And that's what we have to teach students, how to write to win. So there are tons of scholarships, but the key.
Tell us about the kinds of scholarships. For example, everyone knows about an athletic scholarship. Everyone knows about, let's say, a physics scholarship. But what are the types of academic scholarship, let's say? What are the types of scholarships that are available in a broad sense?
Well, the biggest scholarships right now are for students that are studying science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The biggest scholarships are in that field. You have students that want to study journalism or multimedia. There's the National Association of Black Journalists, and all those other media related organizations have scholarships. If you're going into teaching, there are teaching scholarships. If you're going into the arts, there are arts scholarships. But I always tell students to look into the Department of Labor, first of all, and I want them to go into a career where in 4 years and 8 years that the Department of Labor is going to say, we need people in these jobs. If you follow the Department of Labor and you're going into those top 100 careers, you're going to find scholarships in that field. But if you're going into a field that's not listed, you need to be mindful. It might be a little tough for you to find those kinds of scholarships. They might be a few, but at the end of the day, we want our students to be employable. We want them, because the Department of Labor is saying, this is the demand and these are the jobs that need to be filled. And so if you go out into a field that is not a top field, chances are we all know somebody who went to college and came back with college debt and no degree.
Right. Oh, Gwen, we can go on and on and on and on, and we're already late, but I can't get off understanding financing a college education and the dynamics of paying for college. There's one more topic I'd like to touch. List price or ticket price and discounts. How does that fit into our planning? Oh, something else, education savings accounts. How does all that fit together for parents planning to send their children to school?
Yeah, so I mentioned 529s. That's part of your education savings account. So parents, I don't care if you put away $10 a month, that's part of your education plan. But the bottom line is, if they look for today to see what the cost of college education, they can be assured that it's going to increase. So they have to be, conscious of that. So as it relates to winning scholarships, students have to understand that, the cost of college education is expensive. You've got to select a college that is affordable, and you got to make sure that you're tapping into those scholarships that will help you increase your opportunity.
Oh, I'm enjoying this conversation, but we're out of time. So if we could wrap all of this up into a nice little package, what would be the takeaway you'd like people to have?
Well, the takeaway is that you've got to create a plan, and that plan starts the minute you hear me say create a plan. So if you have a student that's in college already, you still have to plan. Think about how much it's going to cost my student for the next 4 years. How much? and think in terms of, I've got to come up with that over a 4-year period. Because when I went to Morehouse, when my son is a graduate of Morehouse, I didn't have all the money, but the bell didn't go off right away that I had to have 4 years. So think about the 4 years and say, I've got to come up with 300,000 or 200,000 or whatever the case may be, and then plan your work.
And what's the call to action? What do you want people to do with this new knowledge?
I want them to pick up my book, The Parent Smart Guide to Sending Your Kids to College Without Going Broke. It's on my website at freshperspectivesseminars.org. I want them to be engaged in understanding college debt, which leads to families going broke. And if you don't understand and you let it happen to you, you're going to go broke. And so we want people to be mindful to say, what can we do to cut the cost of college debt?
And if people want to know more, how do they contact you?
Area code 609-474-4877.
Say it again.
609-474-4877.
Gwen, it's been fun having you as our guest today. Gwen Thomas is an education consultant, scholarship strategist, and founder and executive director of Fresh Perspectives Seminars Incorporated. Thank you for being here today. We've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure we can learn lots more.
David, thank you very much.
Thank you for watching Transform Ed Consulting. Explore our services. Subscribe to the Transform Ed Consulting YouTube channel for the latest news and updates.